So what I want to talk today about is probably a little bit developer focused, where when we think about security, quite often we think it's all about infrastructure, those networking guys and firewalls and things. But I think there is a role that a developer has to play, considering the kind of things that has happened. So that's what I want to talk about. I think there's enough statistics to scare everyone about the problem with security. Just every day there are 30,000 websites are hacked daily, right? So we all know the statistics. So why is this guy here? Not to kind of ridicule or make fun of, but if you remember that I think it was the FEMA in Hawaii, somebody just pulled the wrong alert, right? Saying that this is not a drill, this is a real nuclear attack, and people just were running away. Now, in that process, I think this person was posted something in the Facebook, and you can see in the red circle that it is all the passwords were all on sticky notes on multiple terminals, which you could focus and see. Right. So when we talk about security, it's not like there is a one way or one platform or one solution that can guarantee 100% security. It's because you never know where the whole loophole is. Even when you look at what the Target has, the breach, the biggest data breach, what was the source behind it? Somebody bought a cheap open source malware that they installed, and that was the attack that was used by people. And even look at the Log4j. It's been used for so many years. A great tool for you to collect telemetry about your application and analyze and monitor what's happening to your application. Look what it has done, right? There are many ways that something people could hack. So, the only thing that is completely secure is something that nobody can use, right? That's the only thing that's 100% secure. But what you can do is that take the necessary measures, again, not because you want to shift the legal consequences, but as a developer, as an infrastructure person, that you have taken the necessary steps to avoid. And even, sometimes even the reason for attack. It was surprising to see that Russia and the USA had a talk about Ukraine. And when the talks were not going well, the next day, no MiG jets were flying on Ukraine, but the Russians brought down 6 of the infrastructure using a cyber attack, right? So even now, what people are using to fight the war is based on security. And they may randomly find somebody to do this. And when they randomly find, who are they going to go first? The one who has not done enough work where there are a lot of holes, right? Again, not trying to fill all the holes, but then what is that we can do to avoid that? So in my talk on this is about what is a kind of what a zero trust architecture is, what are the components of that, and then what's the developer's role. And primarily, I'm going to focus on identity. I think, like the gentleman presented before, identity, multi-factor authentication, they are core to zero trust things. And then, if time permits, I have some hardware issues. It was crashing, but hope it doesn't happen. Then I'd like to do a demo and go through this. So what do we mean by zero trust? Traditionally, we always thought, like it's the military, the perimeter security. As a network, people would always say, as long as it's inside my thing, then physically it is secured. The firewalls, the network security groups, the layer 3 firewall, and all that. So I'm safe. But now that's no longer possible, right? It's a pandemic has definitely accelerated that. Even otherwise, we were becoming mobile, and you bring your own device. you're working from home. There is software as a service applications. Like for example, at Microsoft, they don't pay me to buy my personal device, but I have two profiles. One is my personal profile, and the other one is my work profile. And even in our Play Store, I go to my work profile Play Store, which are different applications. Let's say I'm doing an Outlook beta, which is only for dogfooding for Microsoft. I have to you go to the work profile and get it, right? So we need to come up with clever ways to kind of accommodate this whole changing landscape. People, the other day, one of the consultants told me that there are 3 people. These guys, what they're doing is they're going to Colorado, staying there, renting a house for 3 months, and then working, and then they go. So they're actually traveling across U.S. because of this work from home. So then the question is not about whether you have internet connection. Is it safe connecting to your assets from those random places? So you need to assume, you can no longer assume the perimeter, but you need to assume that everything is coming from a source that is that you have not sure of, right? That should be the approach. So when we say zero trust, what we are talking about is a strategy so that we can look at it in a holistic way and try to protect all your assets, with this assumption as that we live in a new, different world. So that's what we mean by zero trust architecture. Now, so there are 6 components that I talk about, right? One is identity. So first thing is multiple identity provider. And like the gentleman who talked before me to say that, how do I, based on certain things, how do I do a multi-factor authentication? I'll give you an example. My phone is my own, but my device is given by Microsoft. It manages the device. So whenever I'm asking all the things, I no longer do VPN, and it doesn't ask me for multi-factor authentication because the device is managed. There is a device management program that is monitoring the health and safety of my things. So I don't do multi-factor authentication all the time. Again, security should not become an annoyance, right? Security should be there where it's appropriate. But on the other hand, if I want to access my benefits from my personal computer, Microsoft will then ask me, send it to a request to my phone authenticator app. Then I go and confirm, and then the authenticator app itself has a password. So I use that. So the multi-factor authentication, it's not universally turned on. It could even be that certain usage will require multi-factor, certain usage may not require, depending upon whether you're a partner or you're internal. So the ability to contextually turn those things on and off. And then another biggest thing, I think, is it's no longer, okay, I know who the user is, let them do whatever they want. The session, where are you? What is the session parameter? When I say a session, let's say I'm accessing an application. So that user information and the session information. The session information is Raj Krishnan is using an application from Chicago, Illinois, on this PC at this time, right? Now, why is it necessary? Now we are using advanced AI techniques to not only make sure that you are the person who say you are, but is there an unusual pattern? If Raj Krishnan is accessing the application at 1 o'clock in Chicago, and somebody else who claims to be Raj Krishnan is accessing it from Japan, you know immediately there is an anomaly pattern, right? So the session information is very critical. Now, so the identity is the first one. The second one is devices. So corporate devices, unmanaged devices, your device management software, things like Intune or Ironman or whatever MDM that you have, that's the other one. And if you look at all of that, all in the one is the security policy enforcement. It's not a software, it is not a product, but what you're doing is for each one of them, you're applying a policy and making sure that passes that policy, or you modify what a person can do or cannot do, like the gentleman mentioned before. Can this person access this file? And those are the policy enforcements based on the context, based on the device it's coming from, based on the identity, based on the type of authentication that person did. All that would be used to enforce certain policies. Same thing goes to data. And again, there were scenarios about files, structured data, and unstructured data, email, documents. And one of the biggest trend I'm seeing is what we call data cataloging, right? Classifying, labeling, and identifying PHI and PII. But now, what's the point of classifying all that, but you don't have a mechanism when an application comes, you're not checking to say, hey, this is PII. Is this person allowed to see this thing? If the application doesn't recognize this classification and security, what's the point? Yeah, you can say I've classified, I know what's PII, but the policy enforcement should not only just classify the data, but take it to the context and then only release the data, anonymize the data, decrypt the data, row level, column level. Those things are done at the application level based on the classification of the data. And same thing as SaaS applications, right? Like if I'm accessing Salesforce, if I'm accessing Dynamics, or on-premise applications. So that's the same way, like who can access those applications? Like as an example, at Microsoft, we have something called My Apps portal, where I could go and all the applications that I have access to, I can launch from there, single sign-on. It's already mapped. It's in my Salesforce credentials, token-based. So those are the kind of things, again, using policy enforcement. And of course, the infrastructure and network is something that all our infrastructure people do in terms of the IaaS, if it's a cloud, or if it's a VM on-premise, or if it's a containers, or if it's serverless. Anyway, serverless is a server, but somewhere else. So that infrastructure. And then, of course, where we have probably a lot of sophistication is network, right? We have network security groups, layer 3 firewalls, layer 7 firewalls, and all those things. So these 6 things, and then bringing them all together. At the bottom, what you're seeing is monitoring them all across. Okay, what is the IP address this identity came from? I know you got authenticated, but is it coming from Russia? Like, funny thing, I was building a mobile application, and I used application insights to track all the information about what is the incoming IP and what device are they using. The thing is, you can get all this information. As soon as I just took it from a development and production, the first thing a user was from Russia, just checking to see what I'm doing. So we need to have a visibility across not only who logged in, what applications they are accessing, where are they coming from. So that is what I mean by zero trust architecture. A policy-driven things to protect your assets, leveraging identity, and tracking the source of where somebody's getting it, right? So if you look at, from an identity perspective, which is what I want to focus on, is that traditionally what we did, if you remember, people put some user ID and password in SQL Server or an LDAP directory, and each application had its own user ID. No wonder the guy has to put those sticky notes on multiple devices, right? And then no visibility, no single sign-on. A little bit advanced would be cloud identity, so where you federate with your partners, and so that you're not managing. The biggest risk of each application having its identity is that if I have 100 applications, when somebody leaves, I need to go to these 100 applications and take them all off, right? But if I have a federated identity, if a partner is allowed to access, when he leaves their directory, they can no longer access mine. So I'm not managing people's identity, but I'm just, trusting where the people are coming from. So that kind of a federation, conditional access, and some kind of analytics. But the ultimate thing is passwordless. And that's at Microsoft now, I have no password. That's because first thing I use things like Windows Hello for business, and I use biometrics. The first time when I register, there is a private key on my device. And once the first time it goes and does the mapping and the public key, after that, no credential travels through the internet. It's all on your machine. As long as you keep your machine safe with all the protection, nobody can do this, right? So that's the optimal thing. And then it's not only the user, but device and where they're coming from, using all that to monitor your identity, right? That's the other one. Now, in the why I focus more and more on identity is that I think it is the biggest asset and the starting point, right? identity should be the perimeter. Before it was your company network, but identity is the perimeter because that is your first entry. You need to verify who is coming into your things. So using things like MFA and passwordless authentication. And more importantly, defining roles, right? Most of the times we confuse authentication with authorization. Just because somebody claims to be who he or she is doesn't mean they should need to have access to everything, right? You need to have scoped access. Okay, I'm Raj, and I'm a cloud solution architect or a digital strategist. I don't need to see the finance data or employee salary, right? So it's not only about legitimizing who I am, but even restricting it based on my roles and access controls. Like, for example, why do I have to have access to an API server? If I did a Postman to get an API that's in my network, just because I work for Microsoft, I shouldn't be allowed to do that. So you need to kind of put access controls based on who you are, what your specific needs are, right? This is a little a tough chart, but I'm going to quickly go through. Here, what we are saying is that there is user and device. So, and everything is based, here we are using, oh, I think it went back to my, sorry. Okay, so the first thing is from a user risk, what are the risks? And multi-factor authentication is required. What is the session information? And the second thing is the device. Is this managed device? Is it compliant? Like, for example, when you have an endpoint management on your device, it is sending the health of your device, your IP, your have they patched your things? All that information is used. And again, we are using a policy, right? Okay, based on, okay, this is a corporate device and it is fully, health is good. Now I'll let them access my corporate resources. So here what you're seeing is that it's not just the identity alone, but taking all this and enforcing policy. And of course, based on that, we enforce certain things. I need MFA in certain scenarios or for certain applications. So I decided, I think the gentleman mentioned, that was funny. He said, we don't want people to do MFA every time they want to get to a file. So how do I do this? First thing is, do they have a token? And do they need, are they coming from a managed device? In which case, I'm going to skip that because that's already been verified, right? So enforcing some of those policies. As soon as you suspect something happens, requiring them to do password reset. And again, if it's a remote desktop, or if I'm using any of the Office or Salesforce, again, using the AD and the identity as a central piece to map your identity and having single sign-on. So that's what the user zero trust means, is that you do not trust anyone anytime. Each session, you assume that you don't, it's coming from a source that could breach your assets, and then validate that session based on the device it came from, based on the identity, the authentication, their access, and then make the decision every time they come to access that resources. So I'm not a big infrastructure expert, but I definitely focus quite a bit on development. So what this developer has to do, right? It all looks like, okay, I need to set up Azure Active Directory, multi-factor authentication, Intune device management, perimeter security, firewall. So what's the role of the developer? It's not a replacement for typically what you do, threat modeling, do code review, do penetration testing, but what you need to do is that you need to build your application thinking that this person could do anything and really take over your system and get access to your data. And also, you assume least privilege. You start out with a user. If I log in, what can I do? Nothing. Okay, then you say, okay, I'm the manager. Okay, if you're a manager, yeah, you're able to add an employee. So now I'm looking at the application level. There is certain operations that I can do. And then I build my application with a scope saying that first thing I verify is Raj, and then I verify his role as a manager. And then in my application, if someone who is in the manager role are going to do this operation called create an employee. But if I'm an employee, the same guy authenticated, I'm in the same application. When I try to do that operation, that the application should prevent them from doing that. So that's what I meant by zero trust, zero privilege, validate everything and leverage that, right? So when we talk about zero thing, this is what we do. Like you authenticate and authorize, and then use every information, device it came from, what application they're doing, what workload, and then the data classification. Remember I said, like I've classified the data, but how do I incorporate it in my application to say that, hey, if it's a PII, and if you're a guy who's not a physician, and you shouldn't be seeing that PHI data, and that should be in the application. Whatever I do on the data side, classify, label, and protect, it's useless. The application just goes and you give access to that application, right? So that is something that developer needs to do. And then use least privilege. There are times that people build applications where they say, okay, just now, because you need to do a task, I'm going to elevate your privilege. Once it's done, I'm going to take it away, right? So build applications with that in mind. And again, the assumed breach is the zero trust, right? Assume like trust no, but always verify. Assume that somebody's going to attack your data, steal your data. So what is it that you need to do to be able to do that, right? So I want to do a quick demo because a lot of the things I talked about can be explained in some way. So what the identity platform that I've been working on is that it allows you to register your application, and so that what you need to be authenticated to get to the application. And if I have to query my Active Directory, I need a permission. So I may give a certain application certain permission to query my identity, to validate identity. And then a lot of pre-built libraries to do, get a token and then use the token, session token, and use the, how do I register on Web API and expose some of those operations. And then support all the identity. It's not just about Microsoft AD, personal accounts, Google, Facebook, Twitter, and then federation. Those are all the things that the developers can use. So let me see quickly if I can do a quick demo. So here I have, let me just minimize this. So you can see that I have an application that it's got two components. One is a client website and a services website. The one that I want to show, let me just see, hopefully it doesn't crash. So what this application is, think of it as two web apps. One is the service API, and the other one is the web application itself. So the idea here is I register these applications in my Active Directory and give different permissions. For example, okay, let me see. I'll do it one more time. If not, I'll just show you how I've set it up. Meanwhile, let me just show you. Okay, so something is not working. I'll show you the way that what the concept behind that is, that I have two applications. One is I register my application. One is a web application. And another one is a client application. So, and when I do this, what I do, like, for example, this is an API application. And what I do is I expose an API. And when I expose an API, what I'm doing is that this is the permission that I'm giving. Okay, here's the name of the scope. And then when I want to access, I need to have the scope. So remember I said if I'm a manager, my scope would be, if I have this scope as to edit, then based on the scope, my application will decide, okay, I'll let you do the operation. And that's exactly what in this things that the authorization is going to be telling that, okay, does he have the, it needs to be authorized, and then this person needs to have the scope, in which case then I will let them do the certain operations, right? And then what I do is I use OAuth to authenticate, and I also use let me show you what happens here in a user flow. So what I do is, in addition to authentication, I take some of the claims from my directory and even from other roles store and use that to decide what this person's claims are, right? So let me see if I can run this user flow to show you what would be returned. So this way you'll see. Let me see. Let me just quickly, give me 1 second. I'll run the flow because I just want to show you the token that comes which is being used by the application. So if I run the user flow, this is what will happen when I'm logging in. It'll ask me to put my credential. And okay. So what it's going to do is send me this token. And this, as part of the token, I will also have claims. So here I have basic claims that says what's the given name, family name, but I can add additional claims, things like what my role is. And then when I authenticate, in addition to authenticating, it is also sending me these tokens and claims. And I use that claim to decide whether or not I can access certain things. So you can register your application, give different APIs that are exposed, use the authentication and the tokens to make those decisions. So this is the way that the identity platform helps you to build applications that will take advantage of, and here I can enforce multi-factor authentication, conditional access, all that you can use the identity platform without writing any single piece of code by just enabling, okay, I need multi-factor authentication. And I can even go to user level and say, okay, these users need multi-factor. And those are the things that you can do with the identity platform. So again, the thing that I want to highlight is that developers can take advantage of the identity platform so that you are developing applications that are compliant with zero trust, and make sure your application is able to take advantage of the security, your authentication, and use the policy. So in addition to all the infrastructure security, that you are also using the information to build an application that is zero trust. So that's the demo. I wish I could show you the application when it's running, but if it runs, what it'll do is I'll based on my authentication, based on my registration, it'll expose a scope and then do me an operation that I'm allowed to do. So that's the thing that I wanted to cover from a zero trust framework and developers and how identity can be used to build applications and the role of developers in building applications.